Good morning. It's Friday, February 6th. I'm meteorologist Andrew Pritchard with the Look at Your Canadian Prairie weather story. It's happening. We've got a pattern change, finally, going on across North America, reversing from northwest flow to southwest flow, flipping from high pressure in the west, low pressure in the east, moving that over towards low pressure in the west. Snow to follow, that is the question mark. It gets the storm track more active, much more interesting across areas east of the Rockies. Just gotta have to kind of look at things now week by week, storm by storm, to pick out when we've got that best chance to hopefully finally get some impactful snow across the region. The last 10 days really reflective of the clipper-laden pattern that we've been stuck in, with flow out of the northwest across North America, bringing in these polar fronts, these Arctic fronts. They bring in shots of cold air, especially for you in the east. Manitoba, you've been exceptionally cold, with these little clippers, little fronts that come through and bring maybe a light dose of snow or light wintry precipitation. Snowpack across the region, big problems from the Canadian prairies all the way down through the central Rockies, the northern high plains, the central high plains. A lot of folks from Alberta down to Denver, back up to Saskatoon and Regina, over toward, Fargo, parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, that just, don't have any snowpack and have really been on the mild side over the last couple of weeks. I saw it was in the 60s Fahrenheit across parts of the northern plains just in the last few days. That is because we are still in the pattern dominated by this ridge of high pressure in the west. You can see the flow coming up over the top of that ridge, coming down from the northwest across the Great Lakes. Of course, very cold air being picked up here. You see one of these systems here. These are these, lows that come out of the northwest, dive down here across the Great Lakes, and they tug a lot of very cold air down with them. But it's cold, dry air. And so instead of getting these big storms coming out of the southwest, tapping into the Gulf, giving us these wide swaths of snow on the north side, it's been these clippers keeping the pattern cold, but very dry. Here's the radar here. Friday morning, nothing really going on. You could maybe find some flurries north of Saskatoon, but the radar is pretty quiet. And the satellite was pretty quiet as well. It's a pretty quiet Friday from the Canadian prairies down through the northern and central plains of the U.S. Temperatures, again, colder in the east, warmer in the west. We're going to start to change this a little bit, and we'll address that with the pattern. But, parts of southern Manitoba, you're at least going to get to relax just a little bit. And then folks in Alberta and southern Saskatchewan, you're not going to be just runaway warm as we head into mid to late February, I don't think. Now, here's the transition. Here's the jet stream, as I showed you on the satellite picture, going up over the top of the ridge. And then we've got this northwest flow screaming out of the Arctic, across the prairie, down into the central plains, parts of the Midwest, and then all the way down to the southeast U.S. It's been very cold, even all the way down into Florida in the recent week because of some of these fronts making their way all the way down across the Gulf and parts of the Atlantic. Now, as I animate this, you can see the transition that happens as we head through the weekend into next week. We see a big push of flow coming in from this trough across the Gulf of Alaska, and that's going to help us kind of flatten out the ridge. And as we work further into next week, we're into Tuesday, now Wednesday, February 11th, getting into the 12th and the 13th time frame. And I'm kind of passing some of the initial storm systems, but the gist is we're getting these troughs now, these big dips in the jet stream, where we used to have this persistent ridge blocking and sending the flow northward. Now we're getting the jet stream to dig, is what we call this, across western North America, and get us these storm systems that go from southwest to northeast. They tap into the Gulf and they bring us a much more impactful precipitation shield and maybe some snow on the north side of this. And really the first catalyst, the first big wave, comes in early next week around Tuesday into Wednesday. Now, I have to temper things a little bit. Initially, the moisture is heaviest here across parts of the Midwest, parts of the southern U.S. with a couple of these first storm systems. But the pattern change that I was skeptical about, if you remember back to my video last week, I saw this kind of being suggested at the very end of the model run, but I was very skeptical this would actually come together. But we're starting to gain some confidence and gaining some momentum as we get closer and get, even a more significant look. Last Friday it was, this kind of happens, and now it's like this happens, and it's maybe more impactful than it looked 7 days ago. And again, getting away from this pattern that's bringing in cold, dry air exclusively out of the north into the region. And as I pause this, you see the impact here. When we get flow coming out of the southwest, when we get the jet stream digging across western North America, we tap into the Gulf and we bring this deeper moisture northward. Again, if I walk this all the way back, we're not seeing anything like that at this current pattern. You see this gray swath. That's bitterly cold Arctic air that's plunging all the way down to the Gulf and really scouring things, sending the deeper moisture down toward the Caribbean. But as we get to February 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, you see that first surge, and that's what I'm talking about. I didn't mean to click forward there because it happens again. You get this first one right around early to mid next week. That system clears out, and then another one is forecast to come in here as we get in toward, maybe February 17th and 18th. And this one's got moisture lifting all the way up toward the Canadian border. So we're going to have to sort out specifics with each of these systems. I'll show you what they look like in a moment. But this pattern change, it gets us away from this exceptionally dry look for areas east of the Rockies, from the prairies down to the central and southern plains of the U.S., and finally opens us up. Again, you see the more dramatic look initially across parts of the Midwest, the southern U.S., but you can see us filling in the greens east of the Rockies. Again, that is a more active and enhanced storm track, and one with more impactful precipitation. Again, we're going to have to hold off getting excited about specifics now because we're still talking about stuff that is 7 to 14 plus days out into the future. But, my message here is get excited. This is the pattern change that we've wanted to see, and we've kind of hypothesized may happen late in the winter as we get closer toward the early spring. And while it may sputter to that start, I think we're finally headed that way. So initially, again, a quiet Friday, high pressure in place across the region, quiet as we head into Saturday as well. Sunday, a little system moves through the region, maybe a mixed wintry precipitation day, pretty light, but I know that light wintry mix can still be kind of annoying on the roads and that kind of thing, but not going to be bringing in significant moisture. Maybe some flurries, some lighter snow across southern Alberta as we head through the day Monday, February 9th. This is that kind of first storm system coming in. You can see it organized here with some rain across parts of the central and southern U.S. as we get into the middle part of next week. This one misses the Prairie off to the south. We're getting into February 14th, 15th, and 16th now. And here you see that bigger storm system. Again, don't latch on to this being exactly how this happens. We're going to talk again between now and then. We'll have another forecast video next Friday before this even happens. But that's a very big area of low pressure that would be tapping into the Gulf, bringing moisture northward, and potentially getting a more impactful area of snow going across parts of the northern plains, parts of the Canadian prairies, maybe bringing some rain and some thunderstorms into very dry portions of the central and southern United States. Overall, this is the kind of thing that we wanted to see start rolling across the North American continent at some point before we get away from winter too far into spring. And it looks like we'll finally get that transition to happen here in the middle of February. So specifics will hold off for a week, but just wanted to kind of confirm the pattern change looks like it may still be happening here mid to late month. This is just verbatim total snowfall forecast over the next 15 days from the European model. You can see that big swath across parts of North Dakota, portions of Montana into northern Minnesota. Don't latch onto that. That's the result of the model pumping that storm system out February 17th through the 19th. And that's kind of just a look at what can happen with this type of storm system. It's no longer clippers with light doses of snow. We start to get into the world of big areas of low pressure that could produce, several 100-kilometer wide swaths of significant snow. So more of this is what we need through the end of February into the beginning of March. And as we get an update on some of our longer range models, it looks like that very may well continue. So this is the look at the seasonal model forecast from the European for March 2026. And again, reflecting the blue shaded areas there on the left, that is, lower pressure east of the Rockies. That is signifying storm systems east of the Rockies, and the green swath there backs that up on the right side. That's the precipitation forecast for the month of March, near to slightly above average across the prairies. I'm going to mention temperatures. If we get this pattern to reverse, it's not necessarily going to be slipping into the Arctic across the prairies, but with troughing across western North America, you're simply going to be bringing some colder air in across the prairies, potentially into the northwestern U.S. as well. If that storm track's running from the southwest U.S. toward the Great Lakes, again, it's going to lean a little bit colder there just by nature across the prairies. So this is not a very significant looking chart, but just kind of expect maybe some cooler temperatures at times for folks who have been on the milder side across central and southern Alberta into southwestern Saskatchewan. Maybe a few more opportunities for some colder temperatures, I guess, is what I'm looking at here. This is the forecast from February 15th through March 15th from the European weeklies. Again, you can see the big impact, the central United States, really dark green there. But what I like to see is the Rockies all the way over to the Great Lakes getting back toward near or slightly above average precipitation. Again, it's not just the prairies. It is a lot of real estate across North America that has been dry going back to the end of the summer, much of the fall and the winter, and now badly needs to make up that deficit as we roll on into spring. March, April, and May from the European seasonal model. Again, near to above average precipitation across the prairies, down into much of the Corn Belt. And then we'll finish here with the NMME, another one of our multi-model ensembles here. A lot of green across the prairies, portions of the northern high plains. This is February on the left, March on the right. So a lot of models have kind of suggested this may happen this time of year. The progression from La Nina to El Nino suggests this may happen. And now we're starting to see some of the shorter term models start to pick up on maybe a more significant pattern change here happening in the next couple of weeks. This is what drives that. I was kind of showing the flow of the jet stream, this kind of equatorial view, and really the lack of flow across North America and the flow that we did have coming out of the Northwest. You see that enhanced southwest flow. It looks like this on the models here. Again, this is really just taking us out into, about 2 weeks from now. And I think the more significant impacts across the prairie probably aren't even really going to happen till the end of February into early March. But this is the complete reversal of flow that used to be and has been over the last 3 months predominantly out of the Northwest. Organized southwest flow is all I've been clamoring for to get a more active, more interesting storm track across North America. Now here's what you see in the temperatures. I mentioned Calgary, you're not going to have an extremely fast whiplash fling into the Arctic, but you're going to see those temperatures come down with a pattern change like this. And maybe that's good if you're hoping for snow. Of course, 13 for a high and lows that are above freezing is not the way to do that. So we do bring temperatures down a bit from 13 for your high today. Next weekend, probably talking about highs in the single digits with overnight lows back below freezing. Same story here in Edmonton, Saskatoon, Regina, and then look, Winnipeg, you actually get a bit of a warm up with this pattern change. Instead of having just Arctic lows sitting right overhead, having those temperatures, highs of minus 15, such as today, getting back closer to the freezing mark at least for your highs. Still cold, but not quite as bitterly cold. And then now, to the west again, not quite as mild, I guess is what I'm trying to say here as we kind of shift up the pattern across the region. Have a wonderful week. We'll talk next Friday, hopefully with more certainty about some of these upcoming storm systems.